Hi everybody, welcome to a new edition of Let's Talk About Education with Antonio Corrales. We have heard about the impact of our education on student life. We have heard about STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, and the impact that STEM education may have on the future careers that students may take throughout their life. But what does it mean to mix art education with science? Well, today we have the honor to have with us Amanda Rinehart, who is in charge of the educational program on a non-profit called the Artistboat. And she's going to be explaining us in simple terms what does that mean and what type of impact the Artistboat may have on students' life. Amanda, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Amanda, why don't we start by letting you introduce yourself to the audience, kind of letting them know how do you get to where you are in your career.
Sure. So I grew up in the north. I grew up in the beginning part of my life in Minnesota, playing on lakes and being outside a lot. Moved to Colorado and at some point discovered Shark Week on Discovery Channel, which made me decide I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I followed that dream to Texas A&M University at Galveston, and I did a BS in marine biology and ended up doing an oceanography, master's in oceanography. And at some point in there, my master's project was on Arctic rivers and looking at how, as climate changes, how that's going to impact watersheds and how it's going to change the fluxes of different elements to the ocean. And so I got really interested in climate change and the north and permafrost. And so I went up to Alaska and did a PhD. And near the end of my PhD, I did a National Science Foundation GK through 12 fellowship, which was basically trying to get graduate students to communicate better, so giving us skills to communicate with all audiences. And then from the teacher's perspective, we were supposed to bring in the current knowledge and science regarding climate change in Alaska. And so I got to work with first graders in Fairbanks, Alaska, and it was just super rewarding. And realized at some point there that my path was not in research. My path was doing education and trying to increase science literacy and climate literacy in school kids.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Before we jump, now that you mentioned the climate change topic, because we may have a lot of school principals, teachers, superintendents that may be looking at us right now. And like any other individual who's not really into science or science not their careers, they had a lot of information in regards to climate change. And besides Al Gore and the documental, you have different all kinds of information out there trying to approach the topic of climate change. What type of recommendation would you give to educators who are looking at us right now and they may be wanting to start introducing some climate change component in the curriculum without getting political, but talking about a reality, which is a fact that basically the climate is changed, regardless if it is for the human-made causes or natural causes. The reality is the climate change. What type of recommendations would you give teachers who might be looking at us right now? We want to start introducing their lesson plan, especially science teachers. We want to start introducing their lesson plan in some components of climate change.
Yeah. So I think you can do it pretty easily without going into the politics of it, because we have known that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would warm our climate since the 1800s. Like, that science has been around since the 1800s. So you can talk about the science surrounding it without even talking about the economic impacts or the social impacts of climate change. You can talk about things like sea level rise, because that is happening 3 times faster along our Texas Gulf Coast than it is worldwide. And not all of that is happening because of climate change. Some of it is happening because of subsidence. So that's just a direct human impact on the level of the coast, basically. So we worked with the NOAA Climate Stewards and the NOAA Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuaries in Galveston last year, and we put on a climate change PD for 4 days. And it was a whole lot of fun, and we're going to try to continue to do it, because I feel like that is a that's a topic that we haven't really addressed around this area
Yeah,
nearly as
absolutely.
well as in some other areas. So I don't know, if you're interested, go to our Facebook site, and hopefully we'll be posting other professional development
And
opportunities.
we'll put that information in the end. But so there are ways that for educators to start introducing the topic without
Absolutely.
getting in political room.
Oh,
Now
yeah,
let you start talking about. Let's talk a little bit about the Artistboat.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what is the Artistboat, and what is it that you guys do?
Yeah. So we started in 2003, and we are an art science integration organization at our roots. So in 2003, our executive director's name is Carla Clay. She has an undergraduate degree in art and also an undergraduate degree in marine biology. And her love and her passion was to integrate the two. So art and science was always integrated. If you think back of the times of Lewis and Clark, how did they record their observations? They drew. You know, Leonardo da Vinci, I mean, you think about his art, it's beautiful, but he was also an amazing inventor. So art and science were always integrated. It was the way that scientists not only communicated what they were learning, but also making those observations and recording those observations. So Carla wanted to reintegrate art and science, and so she came up with this idea of taking kids out on kayaks and taking them out into the marsh. And so we started in 2003 with a grant to serve just Galveston ISD. And since 2003, we've taken every 7th grader paddling for free in Galveston. And so we have this paddling program. We take kids out for about 4 hours, teach them about the bay, and while they're out there, we do a watercolor activity. So that's an opportunity for them to make observations and record their observations in art. Beyond that, we have a residency program. So we'll go into schools, particularly after-school programs, like in 21st century sites, and we'll do different types of art science programs. A lot of those end up as public art. So we've done over 50 pieces of public art in regards to like murals and mosaic projects, big projects throughout the Houston-Galveston area. We have other public art projects. So if you've ever been to Galveston and you saw the tile benches along the seawall, that's us. That was a way for us to educate tourists that come to the beach about our coastal heritage. So those benches are about things as simple as what is an estuary, or about what is a marsh ecosystem, to things like how did they build the seawall, what is Juneteenth, where did that come from?
That is
So
beautiful.
lots of different types of
We're
topics
gonna
there.
post some pictures at the end of this video about those benches, because it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah, they're fun. So we have the bench project. We have all the buckets that you see along the beach that have been painted, if you've seen the benches or the buckets on the beach. But probably since 2003, our biggest initiative has been land conservation. So we've saved about 669 acres
Wow.
on the west end of Galveston Island. And we call that the Coastal Heritage Preserve.
What do you mean save them?
Save it. Well, it was supposed to be developed,
Okay.
and we bought the land from developers.
Basically, you keep their natural stage.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
So it was ranched for a really long time. It is coastal prairie, and we have about 1%, or this whole area was coastal prairie. There's only 1% left.
Correct.
And so we have a little bit of that.
That's awesome.
And it's also coastal wetlands and freshwater wetlands, and we're just in the process of restoring it back to what its natural state was.
That is fantastic. That's now, and I know, because I know your curriculum and I know what you guys do, but holistically talking, because I know that right now you guys are going through a program evaluation, but holistically talking, what type of changes have you seen on students who have experienced the Artistboat and have participated in the Artistboat? Not only students but educational community. Have you seen changes in the way that they think, the way that they behave, or at least their dialogue?
Well, that's the key, right? The problem is we typically don't see the students too much after they do it.
Correct.
Now, our legacy, like I said, we've served every 7th grader in Galveston since 2003. So if a family has stayed in Galveston and they have, 3-4 kids, all of their kids have participated in our program.
Correct.
So just anecdotally, Carla saw somebody out at Shrimp and Stuff in Galveston, and he was like, oh, she had a name tag on for whatever reason. He was like, oh, Carla Clay, I went on the Artistboat trip, and so did my sister, and so did my brother, and now we all recycle, and so you hear things like that.
Correct.
But we don't have a lot of numbers,
Unfortunately.
So that's one of the things we're trying to work on.
You're working on that,
what is our long-term impact on, in the Galveston community in particular, but, what are we doing? How are we
absolutely.
changing kids?
Because you see that a lot of programs like yours, when they're measured, you see that they're making a huge difference in kids' life and in the end in society and all that. So I think that is something really interesting. Now, talking about you more personally as a manager of the educational programming in the Artistboat, what does that mean for future leaders that are maybe looking at us right now, maybe considering going to a nonprofit and kind of managing a nonprofit in terms of the educational component? What does that mean for you? How does that day by day look for you in terms of your job?
Well, it might look really different. So one day I might be paddling because everybody's on the water. So I might be paddling one day, which is great because then you see how all the hard work that you put in and the office pays off.
Correct.
When you get that, oh wow moment, that makes it all worthwhile. I write a lot of grant proposals, so I do a lot of grant management. A lot of meeting with partners. So I had lunch today with somebody who's interested in collaborating on a project. So those are always really fun because it's like, thinking about the what ifs. Ooh, what could we do? Dream big. I do a lot of curriculum and designing curriculum and I would say kind of tweaking curriculum. We have sort of our core curriculum, which I'm always trying to, when you apply for a new grant from the same funder, they don't want to fund the same thing.
Correct.
But we already have a great product,
Correct.
so you have to just kind of tweak it a little bit so
Correct.
that you're still doing the same thing without having to, you don't want to reinvent the wheel every single time in order to do a great thing.
Correct.
That we know works and is a good product.
Correct.
So.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing in our educational system, sadly, is that we're continuing in many cases educating children the same way we used to educate it for the Industrial Revolution, which is pretty sad when you see that we have other variables in the world nowadays. One of the things that you see that the educational system, because of all the requirements and the standard testing, is leaving behind is the creativity, the high level thinking. And one of the things that I see in your program that I found extremely attractive for educators out there is that you guys are constantly pushing those two components, creativity and high level thinking, while teaching the curriculum, while elevating consciousness in students in terms of climate change or nature in general, or the name of different birds in the ecosystem. But the reality is you guys work with a lot of middle schoolers and a lot of sometimes high schoolers, and which are millennials. So and millennials nowadays, we as educators, we have a lot of competition for millennials. They have phones, they have Netflix, they have. So what do you do to motivate millennials within your curriculum in order to get them interested in something like the Artistboat?
Yeah. So, are you thinking about like millennials as how do we get them to
get excited about what you do?
Yeah.
Because you guys do a lot of outdoor activities.
Yeah.
So for that is a motivation in itself, getting out of the classroom. But some millennials can get really distracted pretty easily with technology or games in the phone or Netflix or whatever.
And
so what do you guys do to because I know you guys do a really good job. I have been in there. So what do you think is the key for you guys to motivate those teenagers, those millennials who may be distracted by other things, and you see them so engaged in your product when you're doing it?
Well, I think one of the things about millennials and thinking like long term about millennials is they in some ways they're theoretically, from what I hear, I'm not a millennial, but from what I hear, millennials are really interested in making an impact and doing a good thing. And so that's one of the things we focus on a lot. Okay, here we've shown you this really beautiful marsh, and we've told you why it's important. Now we're going to tell you about some different ways, and not just I'm going to tell you, but let's talk about it. Let's have a discussion about how we can make good choices to protect the environment, because I think that is a really critical thing, that, you know, millennials are more motivated now to do the right thing. Whether that's sometimes making hard decisions, which is a whole different ball of wax. You can say, yeah, I'm going to recycle and I'm going to reduce my water use, but, you know, whether
day by day, are you going to do it consistently?
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the other thing is, you know, with a lot of our kids, you know, they aren't ever outside. You know, they sit at home and they play video games, and
technology really absorbing their.
It really
their
does,
everyday.
yeah. And, you know, so when you take them outside and you show them a new thing, some of them, you know, I have to say, some of them probably, that's just never going to be their thing. And, you know, you can't reach everybody, I guess. But for the ones that you capture them.
They're really motivating.
Yeah, and it changes, you know. It
Well,
changes.
and then you allow them to paint and draw, you know, what they see, which is also a creative incentive in itself, you know, which I think is a big deal. Now, how do you think that the Artistboat, especially for administrators or teachers that are looking at us right now, how do you think that the Artistboat impact the student achievement in general, the general achievement of a student in a regular school setting context?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, so we've seen all the data about what art instruction does. You know, it helps to improve achievement gaps. It improves attendance. You know, you can go on and on and on.
Well, right.
What I think the art science integration in particular is really great, because it does create creative students, and, you know, you can teach them how to do math until they are blue in the face and they could be the best mathematicians, but if they can't solve problems, then what does that do for them?
Correct.
And in the future, isn't that what we're trying to do? We're trying to make students that can think for themselves and solve problems. And I mean, let's face it, we have some big technological problems that need to be solved, thinking about, you know, climate change, thinking about, I mean, just the coastal spine that they're talking about building right now. That's a huge engineering project that they're proposing. So these are big problems, and we need creative people to do them. And so the projects like Artistboat, we do the art science integration, but we also give a student the voice. So one of our projects that we call STEAM Powered, and it's really getting seventh graders the language to be able to talk about climate change from a basic level.
Of course.
And at the very end, they've been with us through a workshop and a couple kayak adventures, and they measure a lot of water quality. And at the very end, they do a conceptual art piece where they can distill down what they learned, what they think, what they feel about climate change. So you're giving them a voice in, you know, what they want for their future, what do they want their future to look like. And then we do an art show. So the Galveston students, they have an art show at the Galveston Art Center. And so it's kind of cool because they have, you know, art displayed sort of as a professional.
Absolutely. Well, and it's like I was saying, you guys made them think about their future and the impact that today's decision may have in the middle term future. Now, for new educators, new teachers, or even seasoned teachers that may be looking at us right now, and they get interested by what they're hearing right now, what recommendation would you give them to start incorporating some type of curriculum as the Artistboat to, you know, what would you recommend them to do?
Well, I think there's a couple different things that Artistboat does, and we take pride in. One is, of course, the art component of it and integrating the art with the science. But the other thing is getting kids outside, and I think that's really important. We haven't really talked about that as much. Just getting kids outside, and you can do that just in your own, you know, schoolyard.
Correct.
Find a crack in the sidewalk where there's, you know, plants growing up, and you can spend time there making observations. You can find things in nature, even if you live in the middle of Houston. You can find nature in your backyard. So I would say that would be one thing to do, is to try to find some nature just on their schoolyard so you can get kids outside more frequently. If you're more interested in like the art science integration, or just arts integration, I should say, I think, there's lots of different resources. So there's an annual conference every year, the Houston Art Partners Conference, which is really fantastic. And they do, so we do just visual arts, but they have art integration from theater and music and visual arts. It's really fantastic. So that's a great resource. Young Audience of Houston has a lot of resources on their webpage, so I would recommend just kind of perusing their website. And then, chat with your art teacher. Just have a conversation about maybe where some things might overlap and where you can maybe have some projects that maybe would overlap. Make a new friend.
That's really, really interesting. Now, what about for school administrators, superintendents that might be looking at you right now and say, well, that sounds interesting. What recommendation would you give, and how can they reach you to get in contact with you? And
I'm sure from the leadership perspective, I know that the standardized test it's high pressure and high stakes, and so integrating art is sometimes, I think a lot of people think about that as taking away from doing math or taking away from reading, and obviously we want our kids to add and subtract, and we want them to be able to read.
Exactly.
But the beauty about art is that it transcends language, and so that's a great way to engage your English language learners and get them to do some language arts or that sort of thing. So I would say, don't be discouraged, and it can be really rewarding if you can do it and do it well. And I understand it might take a little bit of tweaking and experimentation. I mean, nothing you do the first time is, or I should say rarely is the first time you do something perfect. So just keep at it and try to meet as many people as possible. Again, the Young Audiences of Houston, they have a lot of resources, and they will help you if you're interested in working with a teaching artist to do some curriculum. They can help you with getting funding to do that.
That is fantastic. What about if they want to contact you? Where can they go? We're gonna put that information anywhere at the end. But what is the easiest way to contact you?
Our website is artistboat.org, and my email address, you can get me at info@artistboat.org.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That way they can get you. Well, Amanda, I want to thank you one more time for being with us today.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, a lot of information, good stuff. Folks out there, remember that we have this interview and many others in Antonio Corrales' YouTube channel. Let's talk about education with Antonio Corrales and Sterling Evaluation and Assessment.com. Please help somebody today, and see you next time.
Thank you so much.